Hello, it's me. I was wondering if after all these years you'd like to meet to go over everything. They say the time's supposed to heal ya, but I ain't done much healing. Hello, can you hear me? I'm in California dreaming about who we used to be when we were younger and free. I've forgotten how it felt before the world fell at our feet. There's such a difference between us and a million miles. Hello from the other side. I must have called 1,000 times to tell you I'm sorry for everything that I've done. But when I call, you never seem to be home. Hello from the outside. At least I can see that I've tried to tell you I'm sorry for breaking your heart, but it don't matter. It clearly doesn't tear you apart anymore. Hello, how are you?
Hey, good evening, everyone. It's John with the Missouri Liberty Report. Starting out with a little Adele. I know that's way different than my normal music because you know me, I'm a heavy metal guy, but I decided to throw you all off track tonight because I do like Adele a lot. I love her voice, and I love just about anybody who's naturally talented that doesn't have to use what do they call it, to auto-tune to make themselves sound good like a lot of artists nowadays have to because they don't. We got a lot of semi-talented musicians out there, and that's depressing. But anyway, before I get started, just to, I've got Kim Swartz on the line with me. We're going to talk about education in Missouri. And to let you also know that I will be having a couple more guests. I'm trying to get a couple more guests on, and we're going to delve pretty hard into education in Missouri. As you guys know, I hammer on this topic a lot. So that topic is going to be talked about quite a bit here in the weeks coming up. So just be warned. And then, again, Jacob Turner will be on with me August 4th, and then I will have Sam Britton and Trish Britton back on with me probably either the second or third week of August to delve deeper into the whole child trafficking issue because Sam's been covering that a lot. And so if you don't listen to his show, which you should, but if you don't, then we'll get to dive deep into all the information that he's been scouring through as he's been covering this over the past about a month and a half, really. So anyway, let's get the recording started here on the podcast side, and we will initiate the Freedom Talk.
In the restaurant of life, we're putting freedom back on the menu. It's the Missouri Liberty Report with John Williams, working with grassroots organizations and legislatures to make Missouri the freest state in the nation. Let freedom ring.
All right, folks, and we're back with another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Thanks so much for joining me again this week. Again, to all of those who listen on the radio side, the podcast side, or watch the either the YouTube live stream or watch afterwards, I appreciate all your support. So this week, I've got a new guest. Her name is Kim Swartz. She has kind of really been delving into education here in the state of Missouri. She's got a couple grandkids that go to public schools. And she's very passionate about this. And her and Michelle Latham, are friends, and they talk a lot, and Michelle educates her, and then she does some, educating of herself, So we talked on the phone the other night, and she's agreed to come on the show with me. And so today's episode is just education. And again, if you don't watch the live stream, I did tell everybody watching the live stream that in the coming weeks I will have at least one more guest on to really delve deep into what's going on in the public schools, because as you know, I beat up on DESE a lot and the state of education a lot here in Missouri and across the nation. So why not hammer on it a little bit more? Because why not beat up on DESE? They deserve a little bashing around for the way they spend money. So Kim, it's great to have you on. How are you this evening?
Hey John, I am doing just fine. It's a wonderful world. We're glad to be alive in Missouri, and weather was beautiful today, and the schedule was packed, but I'm glad to be here with you. And hello to all of your listeners. Look forward to talking to you today.
It's great to have you on. Like I said, I've been looking forward to this conversation. Again, it's one of these topics that I've really been delving deep into. So it's I don't know. After fighting off this school bond, me and some others, and seeing the scores of how kids are scoring in math and reading and all that, it really gets depressing. And the government and some people's solution to the issue is to throw more money at it, and you and I both know that's not the problem. Money is not the problem, it's the education system. But before we get into all that, if you would, give everybody a little bit of your background, and then we'll just kind of dive into this whole thing.
Well, John, I'm a little bit humble, I guess, and I don't mean that in an arrogant kind of way, but why you would want to talk to me is a mystery, and why anyone on your program would want to listen to me is an even greater mystery. But really, I think I'm just an average grandmother, and I'm an average grandmother who, during COVID, had our grandchildren coming home. We have 2 of our 9 grandchildren who live here in our own zip code, and the older of the 2, at about the age of 12, decided that he wanted to have a vaccine because he was afraid that his grandparents, that would be us, might be affected if he contracted COVID. And now, full disclosure, my husband and I have not had a vaccine. I believe that is up to each individual to decide, and we wanted to know where that came from. And it came from the school. And that caused me to take a deep dive into education and all things education, not just the pandemic and their response and benefit from it. The schools benefited from it greatly and still are, another year of that. And so I just became like a bird dog, just chasing after it, and I'm just a plain old everyday grandmother. That's basically my MO. Now, if I gave you my history, I am a market. My husband was a dentist. He's retired now. And I was a marketing, I hate to use the term, but executive. I was usually in senior management. And I worked in the area of healthcare and the banking institution as a marketing executive and strategic planner and, public speaker and whatever. But none of that makes a hill of beans difference to me. I am really just a grandmother wanting the very best future for her grandchildren. And I really don't get to make choices for them because I'm not the parent. So I try to keep my children, my grandchildren's parents, informed. So here I am. That's me in a nutshell.
Well, here's the thing, though. This is what makes you a little bit different than a lot of other grandparents. A lot of other grandparents, I don't think, get that involved and try to really learn what's going on in the public schools. I think most, I mean, and it doesn't matter what age group we're talking about, really. For the most part, a lot of Americans just think, well, I'm sending my kids to school to get educated, and it just, the thoughts in there for the most part. Now, when COVID hit, a lot of parents were at home with their kids. They got to see their kids, being educated via Zoom, and then saw what they were being taught, got pretty upset and said, that's fine. From now on, we're homeschooling our kids because they got a taste of what they were really being taught. But, as the problem with a lot of Americans is after so long, they kind of forget about it. But we did get a whole new group of people in the freedom movement out of this. So that was kind of a blessing. But, and there has been a big battle over education in a lot of states. But I don't know of a whole...
It's not really, in my opinion, John, that we have a big battle over education. We have a big battle over money. I really believe if you follow the money, you can see why all the decisions are made. And that's my opinion. And it just happens to touch our children in the public education area. Unfortunately, the ones who are most ill affected by it are actually the ones who are most at risk anyway. And that's my opinion. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but so many people talk about, it's education. Well, it's not. That's not the root of it. And I am a Christ follower for your listeners, and I do believe that the root of all evil, as Scripture says, is the lust for money. And people will do anything for money. We go back to the COVID situation. The federal money was tied to requirements that the schools would follow, which had to do with masking. I mean, in our school district, we had a policy where children who were not vaccinated had to wear masks, and those who didn't, children who were not vaccinated had to wear masks. Children, these are children now, who were vaccinated, did not have to wear masks. I mean, that was the beginning of my education on education. I'll tell you that. And what I found was that follow the money. That seems to be the answer to everything regarding government. I mean, there is a school district south of us, and, I won't say a school district. I'll say a community south of us who they were doing drive-through vaccinations back then, and they were actually giving gift cards for vaccination. And then some of the community were coming through with their children and or grandchildren multiple times to receive multiple gift cards. Now, surely, I don't care what party you're affiliated with. I don't care what your political leanings are. That is just not right. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's just bribery. You're just bribing people to take a vaccine, and if you're doing it to kids, if you offer a kid a gift card, well, heck yeah, they don't understand the risks involved, and someone's basically giving them money, and they're like, well, it's just a vaccine. I've had plenty of those. Who cares? Take another one. They're not going to.
The kids didn't get to make the decision. It was adults driving them through.
That's true.
Then. And as I understand it, the use of the money would include suggestions like having vaccine clinics on site, which in Cape Girardeau that happened. I don't know whether this happened at Cape Girardeau or not, so I want full disclosure on that. But there were, it was suggested by the government during that time of vaccine pushing that the kids could be in a lottery, the ones who were vaccinated, for a like a PlayStation or a new iPad and this is sick. It is sick policy to make people sick. And I just had to stand up and be a mouthpiece for, are y'all crazy? I mean, that seems to be my mantra anymore. Are y'all crazy? I think people are crazy anymore, don't you?
Well, I don't. Listen, don't get me going down that rabbit hole because we won't get into education at all. We'll be talking about everything plus education. Yes, unfortunately, during COVID, we saw how easily people were manipulated by fear and propaganda, and then money, the money. And then one of our listeners here, Catherine Dreyer, says, who paid for the gift card and the PlayStations? Was that the local school board or, who? And, again, as you said.
Well, the answer to that is that the government gave the schools money, and the schools, there was a list of what the money could be used for. In KEYK Public School District, we actually now have a surplus. Well, now, let me say I'm going to back up. In February, it was $39 million. In last school board meeting that I attended, I can't even remember, I'm sorry, was probably April. And it was $34 million. So with some very creative accounting, school districts who had a budget and the ability to provide the proper services of education to their community could substitute COVID money into some allowable services and pull their budgetary money. You see what I'm saying? It's a substitute, right? Back out. And so they were using COVID money for what they could, and they were saving the rest of the COVID money. So now we ended up with a surplus. There are other districts right next to us, as a matter of fact, that didn't manage their COVID money so well. But nonetheless, whatever, that COVID money, that's your money. That is nobody's money but your money. It's sitting in a savings account right now with a big question mark on it. What are we going to do with this? Now, do you think that's right?
Well, no, of course I don't, because what they do is, basically, what they're going to do is they'll trip over themselves trying to spend that money. Now, will it be spent
well?
Well,
you must have watched
no.
the budget committee at the end of session, last session. They had so much money, they were throwing it at everything.
Yeah, it's that way. The last few years, they have tripped over themselves to spend these excess funds that they have, and instead of saying, hey, well, I guess not in 2020. I think in 2022, there was an attempt near the end of the session to give everybody a refund, like $500 per person up to $1,000 per household, but that refund was only to go to those that have a tax burden, i.e. those who pay state income tax. And, of course, there are people like, oh, everybody should get a refund. It's like, well, if they didn't pay into the state income tax. What's that?
And a trophy.
Yeah, and a trophy. So it's like, okay, and it just, the bill just died because some people weren't happy that not everybody was getting it, even though the bill laid out only those with a tax burden should get a refund. But instead of doing that, yes, now we put $2 billion plus into I-70 and then we've got what, Medicaid expansion and things like that, and it was unconstitutional. It's a myriad of things. I don't even get me freaking started on it because then I'll blow a head gasket. But I mean, again, here
it's no different for any topic that you could even talk about. The same is true in the education realm. DESE is the only that I know of, the only unelected, bureaucratic organization that gets a raise, and the raise was significant this year, for failure, basically. Because if you look at the MAP scores, proficiency scores, the graph goes in a downward direction and has for quite a long time. As we were sitting, my husband and I have attended every school board meeting for the last couple of years, and I mean, since the day our grandson got in the car and said, "Hey, I think I'm going to get a vaccine because I'm worried about you." And so we started going to school board meetings, which, by the way, I don't really recommend that to your listeners because you will learn nothing at school board meetings. I'm just going to say that straight up. If you do not do your own homework and your own investigation, you will not learn anything at a school board meeting. That's the best advice I could give you. But what we realized was, now, you know what? I skipped a beat right there. I went off on a down a different rabbit hole, and I forgot what I was talking about in the first place. Isn't that terrible? What were we talking about right before that? You will find this will happen to me a lot because I'm a grandmother.
Well,
that is my age speaking to you in real time.
Hey, listen, I have old man brain, and when we talked a couple days ago, I said this is a free-flowing conversation. So if one of us may remember what we were talking about here in the next few minutes. Now, a listener.
It usually happens to me about 3 in the morning. Can you take a call at that time?
At 3 in the morning?
Yeah, when I remember what we were talking about.
Don't do that. I gotta work. I gotta work tomorrow. That will not. I will be very unhappy with you, Kim, if you call me at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my! But really, that's why we started attending school board meetings. And I was being a little catty actually by saying don't attend them because you won't discover anything. I discovered a lot actually by attending. To start with, I discovered that what used to be thought of as a school board that was legislatively supported, legislatively actually created for the purpose of keeping local values protected, became something else. It became a tool that the bureaucrats use to implement their ideologies and philosophies. And it is the school board is incentivized to do what Bessie, in particular, wants them to by money. And you know what they call people who do bad things for money? Well, I'm not going to say. I'm just not going to go there. But you know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a sad story. It is disturbing on levels I can't even discuss. I actually have some literature here that I could read to you, but my husband said, don't do that, about some of the curriculum and some of the books that are in the library at the school. But what we found was you learn nothing by going to a school board meeting. Nothing. Let me give you an example. As we were sitting there for 2 years, and listen, I'm a grandmother, so I'm not like highly technical. When you said whatever you said about your microphone, I was like, I don't even know what he's talking about. But so it took me several months to realize I don't know what they're talking about. I've never seen the things that they're talking about, like policy BDH-1. What are they talking about? Well, and after you spend some time in the system and you finally realize, you can go to their website. You can click on policies reviewed, and then you get another drop-down box, and there is the policy. Who knows that? They don't teach you that as parents. They don't teach you how to see what they're going to talk about at the meetings. The grandparents, they don't tell you what they're going, how to get to the points that you're interested in on their website. But eventually, if you're interested and you are persistent and diligent and patient and really mad, you will eventually get there. So, at the school board meetings, I'll just give you my first example of awareness. I finally figured out where the policies were coming from on their online website. And one of the policies had to do with how much, which had nothing to do with my grandchildren, by the way. I'm just trying to learn, how this all works. The policy had to do with the minimum amount of purchase that the school could spend without letting a bid. Okay? According to their policy, it was $3,500. Now, to me, for a school system as large as ours, which is like an $80 million budget, that's not much money. I agree. I get it. However, the policy that was recommended to be changed was to change that amount from $3,500 to $50,000. Now, you can buy a car for your teenager for $50,000. You buy a lot of things. You buy a lot of influence in a local community the size of ours for $50,000. So we're sitting there, and I finally figured out, how do I find out what they're voting on ahead of the time that they're voting on it, and saw this policy. Not one board member said, wait a minute, you're going from $3,500 to $50,000 before you let bid. That's what they're voting on. First reading, second reading, vote. No one ever asked a question. I mean, I would be like an auctioneer. Like, what? I get it. $3,500. How about 10? How about $10,000? How about $15,000? How about 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50? At what point do you ask the question? Do you agree with me, or am I just like off the rails here?
Well, no, because the thing is that, it's our money, okay? It's people that live in that area or whatever, it's their money. And when you it doesn't matter if it's government, schools, whatever, they'll up, payments, or they'll spend more money on something, and because it's not technically their money, they have no problem with it. They don't question it because it's not theirs.
True. But it is the people that voted them into office being a school board position. It is their money.
Right.
And you would think that there's some accountability back to the voter, even if you agree with the $50,000 threshold, that you would have some explanation at a meeting that this is why you were voting on it. But there's no explanation. This is how it goes. Tonight, we're having the first reading. Now, I don't have the exact, by the way, the exact policy in front of me, but it's letters. That's how the Missouri School Board Association sends it down. So just say it's ABC. So tonight we're having the first reading on policy ABC. Is there any discussion? Of course there isn't. Well, okay, they go on to the next thing. The next month, we're having the second reading of policy, the revision of policy ABC. Is there any discussion? No. Do I have a motion? I so move. I second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Silence. Not one word really? I mean, if I told my husband, we're kind of Dave Ramsey people, you know. I mean, we budget and we tell our money where to go, as Dave Ramsey says. I can't take credit for that term, but if I told my husband that I needed an increase in budget, let me just scale it back a little bit, I don't know, $8,000 a month, he would ask me, why? Why? But not one school board member asked that question. And that really made me curious. Why would they at least ask the question? Now, I'm not going to say, because I don't know, that every school board member knew what the policy they were voting on was, or did not know what the policy they were voting on was. But I will tell you this, 2 years later, a couple of months ago, I was at a school board meeting, and they were talking about the policy that Missouri School Board Association sent down to be revised, which is called the community engagement, or something like that. And so one of the school board members said, bless his heart. I mean, I'm so happy that he actually was curious. Said, well, wait a minute. I want to see what the policy was before the revision, and I want to see what the recommendation is now. So I'm sitting there going, like, you mean you haven't read it before you're here at the meeting? And the secretary to the administrator kind of leaned over and got on that board member's laptop and sort of like click, click, click. And there was the policy in red and green. Red is what they want to take out, and green is what they want to add in, or vice versa. I don't know what the colors mean, but at this point, because I don't have it right before me, but that board member has been on the board for, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years. What that tells me is that he has never read a policy before voting on it for the past, I'm going to give him some grace to say 2 years. I like him as a human being. He is a nice person. He is a great dad. He is probably a great employee. I have no way of knowing, but as a school board member, I'm a little concerned. This is what we have on our school board. Our school board, this is what I was going to say before I got distracted with my other rabbit hole, that the school board was originally set up to protect the local community from the overreach of the government bureaucrats, or even elected outside their district, those people who don't share the same values. And so our school board is supposed to represent our values as a whole, as a majority, as a community. They're supposed to have our pulse and represent that in their administration of their duties as a school board member. I don't know about all school boards. Well, I do know about one other one, and that is up in, and I know you've heard me speak of Gail Griswold up in around the lake, Camden County. They certainly do have the pulse up there as a local community. Cape Girardeau County is a very conservative community. I mean, we're the home of Rush Limbaugh, for crying out loud, you know? I mean, really? So I have had some interaction that would lead me to believe, and I know these people, it's a small town with 38,000 people. I know them to be conservatives in their philosophy, politically. And like you, probably more libertarian than they even realize. but they think they're under the control of the bureaucrats in Jefferson City. They don't know. Have you seen that meme where there are people kind of bent over with their backs flat, and there is a chessboard on their backs, and then there are these bureaucrats on overplaying, moving the pieces, and it says, just stand up, or something to that effect.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot. It's true. Everybody has to do is
so
stand
true.
up, and the game's over. Just stand up.
That's right. That's true. I have hope, because I'm just kind of an optimist about that sort of thing. I just can't believe that if people knew. And here is the other thing, John. I have such a heart for young families, because my kids, they have young families, and they are busy, and it takes two incomes to live in the manner that they were raised, if you will, and they want to, and they want to contribute. And my daughter, 41 years old, she is the single most generous human being on the planet. In fact, I look at her and just go, really? I mean, you don't want to sock that away for a future concern that you might have? But she's so generous. It's just who she is. And she is the perfect example of, I have a full-time job. It is a job with high responsibility. My daughter is a specialty pharmacist, actually, who deals with really sick and intensive treatment patients. And so, I mean, that wears on her a lot. She has two children in the public school system. And she has a heart for people in need outside work or family. And so she is very generous. She's very generous. She is too busy to get in the weeds of what you and I are talking about right now. You would think I would talk to her a lot about these issues, but I don't. You know why? Because I don't want to lay any guilt on her. As a parent, she's doing everything she can do. Does that resonate with anyone that listens to your show at all, about the pressure that young families have to work and provide, to create the experiences that we had that were kind of easy? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, here's the thing with me, Kim. This is just the way I look at things, okay? And it's because of the system we live under. The system that brought, this is going to sound sexist to some people, and I don't care. The women's lib and getting women into the workforce, that was all by design. That was by design to get more women into the workforce, because then the central bank could take money, their tax money too, on the interest that they charge our government to print the money for them. And when they did that, and both parents are now working, that means the school and the government is entrusted with teaching and leading the children. And so when that happens,
that's the saddest commentary.
And then so the parents are in a bubble. They're in a work bubble. They're trying to take care of their family, and things are coming at them a million miles an hour, and they're trying to combat all that because the system is set against the nuclear family.
That's exactly right.
And so I don't begrudge anyone who says, I don't want to bombard with somebody who's clearly working their tails off, trying to raise a family, doing all these things. I don't begrudge anyone. I do hope that those people will take a little time to educate themselves, and maybe you educate them a little bit and see if that leads them down a path to educate themselves more, I think that's pretty it's pretty conducive to someone. That's what happened with me. Somebody handed me a documentary and said, watch this and see what you think, and it just led me down this barn-burning path. But the system is against us. And and this is why, another reason why I want people to focus on their local and state area, and to heck with the feds, because that's a dumpster fire that you're never going to put out. So if we can get Missouri right, we get local control back of our education and some other things, people get to keep more of their paychecks, and they're not having to struggle, and they're not having to deal with all these things. Maybe that gets us back to a point where, things are more under control. We take central planners out of the picture, but that is all dependent on, like the meme, the photo you're talking about, people standing up. We can do all that work here in Missouri, but if people decide to let the elites play chess on their back, nothing gets fixed. It takes a whole lot of people. But yeah, the system has been set up against the people in this country, and until people get out of their cult worship, and I don't care if it's Republicans or it's Democrats or even some libertarians, if you can't see past an individual and you can't see what a party, either party is doing by divisiveness and keeping people fighting while they go to the bank, we're not going to get out of this. We're not going to get out of this mess.
I agree with you 100%. And I'm going to switch from education to something else. Just to give you an example that confirms exactly what you're talking about. People are so busy in their own cocoon that they have no idea what's going on around them. And my husband and I were having dinner one night, and it was a celebration event for another couple, and there were several couples there. And I brought up the issue of human trafficking. And one of the couples there, because I talk about the things you talk about, John, a lot, and it's not just education, it's other things as well. And so the husband of this couple, he tapped his wife's leg, like, here she goes. Well, it wasn't my party, so I didn't say anything about it. I just let it go, but I certainly did. It didn't go unnoticed, right? So we got home that night, and I said, did you see so-and-so tap so-and-so's leg, when I started talking about, and it happened to be child trafficking and human trafficking and organ trafficking and, nefarious things for money. And he goes, yeah. My husband said, yeah, I did. And I said, I don't know. That really bothers me. So about 6 months go by, and we end up at another dinner party. I live in a small town, right? And something came up, and I said, well, and then I brought up child sex trafficking again. And the guy tapped his wife's leg. So now I'm going to just be honest with you. Here I am on public radio. I had maybe an extra cocktail. And I just said to him, what? Why are you tapping her leg? I was just furious. Can we not talk about this? Can we not have a conversation? It's the truth. Oh, no, I didn't mean that. This is what I'm dealing with, or what we all are dealing with. People don't want to know. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to deal with it in any way. And yet, their grandchildren, as well as my grandchildren, are at risk. And that's the way our society has put their head in the sand. Really, when you think about it, child trafficking, who can even be quiet about that? And this has been going in Missouri. I mean, really, St. Louis in particular. Everyone knows, but not everyone knows. Why? Because they don't want to know. It's hard truth.
Well,
and if you desensitize children in the public school system, the plural public school systems, and in the public libraries that we're all taxpayers for, I mean, if you ask anyone, surely on the planet, are you in favor of child trafficking, sex trade? They would say no. Well, then why do you vote for people who are? Or why do you support the boards that are? Or why do you support the curriculum that is? I just don't get it. I don't.
You know what?
Infuriating.
Here's my take, Kim. This is what I think, and I could be wrong. I know that when I first woke up to what's going on around me, and heck, this has been 13, 14 years ago, easy. I was very angry with myself because I realized I hadn't been thinking. I had been letting other people do my thinking for me, and I just parroted whatever they said. I wasn't really taking a look around me and seeing what was going on. People do not like to admit, most people don't like to admit that they've been lied to and that they've been wrong about their choices. Then they have to take a look inside themselves and decide what they're going to do. Because after that, when you wake up and you figure out what's going on, there's a lot of work ahead, because if they're like me, I was reading book after book, watching documentary after documentary. I soaked hours upon hours into research. And I just don't think people like to admit that, because a lot of people have this cult mentality when it comes to a political party, that people in that party are a part of the very thing that they abhor. And then they have to step back and they have to reevaluate everything they thought they knew. And there's a lot of people that just don't want to do that, because then they have to admit to themselves that everything that they've said and a lot of things that they believed over the last however many years or decades has been completely wrong. And too many people today do not want to admit fault, especially in politics. They do not want to admit that maybe they're a part of something that is to their detriment, that is leading to the downfall of society, because that means they helped in that process, and that's unbearable for some people. Well, I'm sorry, suck it up, Buttercup, because if you don't, we'll keep going down this road until the end, and it's not going to be a good end.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. I think that the money just exacerbates the whole situation.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
there is not a dollar that was ever offered that most of our boards would ever refuse. I will say that there is one school board in the state of Missouri that said, no, thank you. We're not doing that. And I hope that you will get Gail Griswold on your program.
I'm working on
at
that
some
right now.
point, because she said, no, thank you. We're not doing it. We don't need it. We will take care of ourselves according to our own community values. We will not be dictated to. And that probably made a lot of people in her community mad. $8 million, that's a lot of money. Are you kidding me? I admire her so greatly, really. I don't know of anyone, and I don't mean to disrespect anyone in 63701, but I don't know anybody here that would turn down $7 million. I mean, we were ecstatic about getting $34,000 so that we could put Wi-Fi on buses we don't own, so the kids would have Wi-Fi to and from school. Why do children need Wi-Fi on the way to and from school. Why? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you got it. Well, I mean, honestly, they do that. I think this is the way you look at it, and it's wrong. But they think, well, if every kid's got their head stuck in their phone, they won't be making commotion going down the road. I think that's what literally.
Well, you might be right, but let me tell you what they might be doing while they're on the phone.
Yeah, I know where you're going.
May not be so great.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just listening. I don't know if you. I don't listen regularly to what is the Blaze? See how infrequently I listen to him, Glenn Beck.
Oh yeah, Glenn Beck. Yeah.
I don't follow him. Like he's not. I don't wake up early in the morning and say, "Oh, I got to get some Glenn Beck today," but it happened to be on someone else's signal feed that I do follow, and they said, "Listen to this," and so I did, and it was a fellow who has a ministry that went down to the border, and what he found out was that we've lost. Well, the government reports 85,000 kids. He says it's probably 400 times that number, and that the people that he interviewed, he discovered that children are exposed to pornography at the age of 8. That's the average age of children being exposed to pornography. Well, so, okay, let's see. Now, just knowing that, 8, and now you have Wi-Fi on the buses to and from. So is it possible that this is what kids could, I'm not saying they are, I'm just asking could look at on their way to and from school? And why in the world would the school want to even take the chance to be a part of that? I have no idea. Then you have folks who say, well, kids, just take the school food program, for example. Now, my grandchildren do not need to be provided by the school system and you, because you pay taxes, with breakfast, lunch, or a snack, or a weekend meal, because their parents can afford it. They don't need it, but they get it. They get breakfast and they get lunch. They get it free in Cape Girardeau County public schools. They don't need that. Do they need to see what's on their phones, which they shouldn't even have, by the way, and my granddaughter doesn't. My grandson is a little bit older, so he does have a phone that he keeps with him. Do they need to see something to and from school? No. They don't need to. They need to read their lesson. That's what they need. They need to be prepared for the first class or tomorrow's class or whatever. They sure don't need that. Why is someone giving them a grant for $34,000 to make sure that happens? I'm saying to you that anyone who gives up that much money to see that happens has a motive. What is it? I don't know the answer to that.
It's just indoctrination. If they can't indoctrinate them at school, they'll indoctrinate them on the bus. That's all it is. They're going to get indoctrinated one way or the other. If the government is handing out this money for, and the school chooses to do this, it's just indoctrination. Public schools are nothing more than propaganda centers anymore. That's all they are. And when we see our proficiency, and listen, Kim, when we fought back against this school bond, and somebody at the meeting was very upset, who was the superintendent's husband, attended that meeting. He thought those numbers were bunk, that I got them off a real estate website. And I was like, nope, sorry, that's not where I got those from. And I've looked them up, and DESE has our proficiency scores about the same point that I found on just looking up education and proficiency scores in general. There was some site that kind of, I guess, collects the data. It wasn't that far off, maybe a couple percentage. It wasn't enough to make me go, wow, we're doing better than we thought. No, it didn't. It didn't look that way. And it's like they cannot come to grips. They cannot understand and comprehend the logic behind some parents find that maybe, I don't know, maybe when they send their kid to school, that they want them to actually be educated and prepared for adult life, not taught a bunch of woke, PC, BS, crammed in their head, and then they have to talk a certain way and use certain pronouns and all. No, some parents literally want their kids to learn and comprehend and be very skilled in math and science and reading and comprehension and critical thinking, because they know their kids will outdo others by leaps and bounds if they're educated, not indoctrinated. And I guess this guy just thought, because, see, they wanted to put in a performing arts center. And I'm like, because one kid at school apparently got like, they got some big, what do you call it? When they, dadgummit, a scholarship. And I guess they, for some kind of acting or something. I'm like, one kid gets this. And so now we have to spend $15 million, and a huge portion of that budget goes to a performing arts center? What about, what, I don't know, maybe, just maybe, we start teaching our kids reading, writing, and arithmetic so they don't come out, I'm sorry, this isn't very nice, but so dumb. Is that, I don't understand how that's such a foreign concept. Now, Kim, I've got about 3 minutes, so I'm going to take up the last 3 minutes. I got to cut for radio, and then we can continue on if you'd like to.
Okay.
Okay. But anyway, folks, that's just my 2 cents, people. When he said that at the meeting, I almost stood up and went, do you honestly think that I went to a real estate site? Why would a real estate site have proficiency scores for schools anyway? That doesn't make any sense. I can see school size or a school grade, but not proficiency scores from said school when they're trying to get you to buy a house. That doesn't make any logical sense, but, there I go with that.
It actually makes a lot of sense over here.
Well, okay.
In KEYK County, because there's a competitive
okay.
kind of situation between us and a neighboring community. And so they're trying to show you it's better to live here or live there based on proficiency scores. I mean, it is a ridiculous point, but it is an important thing to professionals moving in. KEYK is kind of a medical hub between St. Louis and Memphis, I would say. And a lot of people are not choosing KEYK because of the scores. However, isn't that funny? It is KEYK who has now, as of this month, maybe about a $34 million slush fund, I'll call it. And the school district, whose proficiency scores are just a little bit higher than ours, but their community is different. It looks different. So everyone's saying go to that community instead. I'm saying how sad that the people who need the most are getting the least because of the people in charge only throwing money at the situation. And that's a sad reality. They have a thing called outcome-based education, which is so much the underlying philosophy, as well. It goes along with SEL, social emotional learning, for those who haven't heard of that. And
hey,
really,
can you hold that thought real quick?
Oh, sure.
Okay. For those of you in the KEYK audience, thank you so much for tuning in this week to the Missouri Liberty Report. Greatly appreciate each and every one of you. Please don't forget to check out molibertyradio.us. Don't forget to check out mofree.org. And don't forget to check out the podcast called Rogue Politics. Make sure you find those, show them some love and support because they've been so good to me. Thank you, and we'll see you again next week. All right, go ahead, Kim. I'm sorry, I had to cut for the radio.
Oh, that's great. For outcome-based education, which is, what all of this is based on, it's basically no child will have a failing score. Now, what are you doing? What are you doing to these children who cannot fail, but they're failing? It's ridiculous. It harms them. You're basically saying you're never going to get it, so we're just going to move you along because of your age, and hope you have a good life when you reach 18. It's horrible.
Well, I blame that on that No Child Left Behind because they set the system up so if a kid's failing, you're not going to get the money. So what do? They just push them on through the grades, get them out of school because the money will continue to flow. As you said, it's all about the money. It's not it's not merit based. It's not proficiency based. It's not success rate based. It's just get them pumped through the school, dumb them down, get them out, so they get out in the real world and they don't know how screwed they are.
Yeah, because the last thing the government school bureaucracy needs is more hard evidence of the failure of the government schools. They don't want it. So they put in these touchy-feely social emotional learning programs. This is not new, by the way. And for those people who some would call conspiracy theorists, I'm telling you, if you go to the UNESCO, World Health Organization, and World Economic Forum, you will see that as, and has been for many years, the recommendation of how the education system should go. And those people who need it the most, who need to be educated in a way that allows them to progress as opposed to literally failing but being passed along, that they're the ones who are left behind. And it's a sad commentary. It makes me sick to even think about it because they're the excuse for why this particular kind of education, OBE, has been implemented. You know what? I'm so tired of it because the left, I'm just going to say it, the left, they use terms that mean the exact opposite of what they imply them to mean. They say things like critical thinking, and it means the exact opposite. What it really means is the use of emotion and logic to make a politically correct decision. It has nothing to do with actual critical thinking. That means critical thinking, the evaluation of all of the information to come to a decision. Nope, that's not what it means at all. But they use that term. They steal everything, right, and flip it. And nothing means what it really means to their own advantage. It's, but, very few people have the time to dig that deep and think about how that really works. The government bureaucracy, the school bureaucracy.
Yeah, it's
The map tests show you. It is. And I am so against Common Core. I'm against the standardized test. And here's why. They say, their argument is, well, we have to have something to compare it to across the nation. Really? How about we do better than the standard? Why do we have to do the least possible proficiency to be considered as educated? Why don't we do what we think is the highest possible? I mean, we're in a small town. We can go as far up as we want to. I said the same thing. There was a policy that was put forth from Missouri School Board Association to the local school board about how much time a superintendent is allowed to respond to a complaint. Now, this has nothing to do with proficiency. I'm just showing you how prevalent it is across all disciplines. And the law is that he cannot, that he has 20 business days. And you can do the math. 20 business days is basically a month, right? To respond to a problem. And my point to the school board was, that's the minimum that he's allowed. Why don't you just set your standard higher? Why don't you just say, we can do better? I'm going to respond to the issue. Give yourself 2 weeks. That means all of the people that are under you, you've had time to collect the information and now respond. Why are you going to make someone with a concern possibly wait a month before you answer? Here's the other thing. Same thing. It's the same kind of thinking. When you go to a school board meeting and they bless you with, they deign to give you, or deign, I should say, excuse me, deign to give you 3 minutes to speak to them. And they promise you that they will have no comment to you at all. Why doesn't our school board, your school board, your next county school board, why don't you say, hey, folks, we're all in this together. We're going to do better than we have to. Why? Why wouldn't we raise the bar? I mean, I teach my grandchildren all the time, kids, it doesn't take that much. I'm thinking of common courtesy and the communication with the people around you. I tell my grandchildren, when an adult speaks to you, you look them in the eye. When you have a response for them, you use yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. Yes, sir, and no, sir. It's pretty simple, please and thank you. The bar is not that high, but if you achieve that, you will be head and shoulders above everyone else, because no one is even going that far. No. They think using foul language is perfectly appropriate at this point. The bar is not that high. I mean, do you see my equation or equating all of these things? The bar is low. We established a low bar. That is what we're doing.
Well, and they don't want to, I mean, at this point, if parents found out about how the money's being spent, or how, what the curriculum are, what the curriculums are depending on a school, they know they're not going to be a board member very long. People are going to be up in arms, and their job as a school board member is, on the rocks. It's doomed. And so it's at a point, because of the love of spending money that's not theirs in the first place, and probably there's probably some coercion in that from the feds and the state even. They don't, again, 3 minutes, a month to respond, because that gives them time to cover their behinds. That gives them time to cover their tracks, because if people really knew what was going on, they'd all be out of a job. That's all. It's just a cover-up at this point.
It's the same reason they don't read the policies at the school board meeting. They just call them out by title. Policy number ABC.
Yeah.
All any discussion? No. All opposed? All in favor? I mean, you don't even know what they're talking about. Neither do they, but I mean, some do. I can't, paint that with a broad brush, but it's disturbing.
Let's face it. They count on people to be uneducated on what's going on in school. They count on them to be uneducated about what could possibly be in whatever they're talking about. And I guess they think people are just there to be there to hear what the so-called geniuses on the school board have to say without any challenge. And they've gotten away with it for so long that when they get a different response, when they get a bunch of people up in arms, they get all defensive, like, well, I don't know what the problem is. Like, well, yeah, you don't know what the problem is because you're used to having your way with the money and all these things, and no one's there to challenge your authority. And that's some of it, too. Some people just can't stand the fact that you would challenge their authority on anything, even though they are an elected position, even though, as you stated, they are supposed to be there to protect from overreach into the local level and to provide a good education. That's the intent behind that job. That's been lost in the ether. And now it's, how dare you challenge my authority? How, when you have a superintendent who's been invited to come on to a local radio show, not for a debate, not to criticize, just to ask questions, and they refuse to do it. And over this school bond issue that's so important, so vitally important that we get this passed, but can't be bothered to come on a radio show and do an interview, but they can show up at little community events and talk it up. But they will not show up to a local meeting they've been invited to. They won't come on to a radio show they've been invited to come on to talk. They can't do any of that because they don't. Some of them are not equipped for confrontation, and they're not equipped on how to really talk this thing up if somebody's bringing facts in opposition to them. Most of them don't know how to deal with it. The only way they know how to deal with it is say, well, you just don't care about the kids, and try to throw, show you, speak to the public as and we heard that. We heard, we were called the great unwashed and everything else because we didn't want this. And I was like, fine. I'm dirty, I guess, but we fought off $15 million, so I can't be that dirty. I must be pretty freaking clean at this point.
There you go.
But a lot of these folks, well, somebody laid it out to me. Superintendents are really there to literally promote school bonds and promote this and promote that, promote spending tax dollars. Or every time a bond's about to be paid off, to just re-up it for however many millions of dollars. That's literally their job, is just to promote school bonds and getting money for the school, and that's it. That is their job. Because as a friend of mine pointed out, in his area, they got 2 of them shot down, and suddenly he wasn't a superintendent anymore. And it's probably happened in other areas where if they can't get school bonds passed, they find somebody else to try to come in and do it because this guy can't get it done. And they just go to another school district and do it there. But that's all they're there to do. They're there to get money for the school, whether it's from the federal government, the state government, or local taxpayers. Their job is to keep the money rolling in. And if that's the only reason for a superintendent, that normally is a 6-figure salary that could, I don't know, go to the teacher's pay instead, then why don't we get rid of superintendents and the assistant superintendents and all these assistant principals and assistant vice principals and their staffing? We could take all that money, because everybody knows teachers don't get paid enough, get rid of the administrative level, take that money, give it to the teachers so you get teachers who stay in place, and also get good school board members who will question things. But until all of those things are done, I have this awful feeling that none of this is going to get fixed. It's going to continue to be awful, and that's why I always tell people, either find a charter school, or if you can figure out a way, because, we have communities now who find a retired teacher. Each set of parents pays that retired teacher so much a week or so much a month. And they go to a local, they go to a central setting, and this retired teacher homeschools the kids, and they pull them out of public education. If that's what you have to do, I would assume you do that, because until enough people, again, stand up, the kids, as time goes on, these kids, the amount of education they get goes down and dwindles and circles the drain of the toilet, and then we people are left to wonder, what is wrong with these kids today? They can't perform some menial task. And on the flip side of that, Kim, we have minimum wage laws, and built into the minimum wage laws is this thing where it says you have to be able to do certain things. You have to have a certain level of education, or you're not even good enough to get a minimum wage job. So what's that mean if education keeps going the way that it's going, and the kids come out with not enough education and skill set to even get a minimum wage job? What are they going to do? They're going to be dependent on the government to take care of them, which is exactly what they want in the first place. This whole thing turns into a steaming pile of horse dung. It is just, holy crap.
And the people who need to be lifted up the most, who have the least advantage, are the ones who are hurt the most. And that is really sad, because they use them, they use that circumstance to justify their decisions. And in educational philosophies like social emotional learning, which people think, oh, that's the new thing. It is not new. It has been around for a long time, but the money has been flowing now for the past few years to implement it, and it basically doesn't really care about your proficiency in math, reading, science, history. It focuses on how you handle sitting in a class for an hour. Well, I'll tell you how we had to handle sitting in class for an hour. There was a lot of self-discipline that had to go on. Otherwise, we were 10 times more trouble at home than we were at school when they found out. But it has become a crutch, an excuse. It's a political hot potato. And they certainly are using it. The whole Castle program that promotes SEL, I mean, it's almost, I'm going to say it's probably in 90% of our schools. I don't have that figure backed up with research, but as far as I can tell, it is, it's certainly here, social emotional learning. It's all that you hear. And what an injustice that is. They base this on the practice of incorporating self-awareness. Now, translate that. Self-management, relationship skills, social awareness, translate that as well. And this, if you do the research on this didn't just happen through Castle in 1994, I think, which is when Castle kind of became the vehicle of promoting SEL. They started with CRT, and then that got people very riled up. So they basically just changed the name of it to social emotional learning. It has been in the it's now in the 2030 plan of the WEF, World Economic Forum, the United Nations, UNESCO, that arm of education, out of that same globalist agenda. They have planned this for years. It's not new. It is just in the last, I don't know, I'm going to say 5, 6 to 10 years, slowly creeping in. Actually, what concerns me, speaking of SEL, is the World Economic Forum and the UN, and they're with initiative. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not. Hey, real quick, Kim, Michelle is wanting to jump in here as well. So if you give me a minute,
sure.
I'm going to try to patch
Yeah,
her.
go ahead.
I'm going to try to patch her in with us as well. So give me just a moment. I don't know how this will work out. I mean, I know I can have two people on at one time, but now I got to remember how to do it. Oh, now I remember how to do it. I'm so smart. No, I'm not. Come on, phone. Add call. There we go. We're going to add Michelle in. Boy, this is going to turn into a barn burner of a show. I'm telling you what. Let me see if I'll try to call her now and see if I can get her on the phone. I'm going to turn this down for a second.
You got me.
Hey, Michelle, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing quite well.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. I can hear you fine.
Hi, Michelle.
Hey. I was just, I was just, hold on just a second. Are you ready for me to talk, John?
Yeah, you go right ahead.
Okay. Kim, can you hear me too?
I sure can.
Well, the reason I had texted John is because I wasn't sure if you were going to get to the UNESCO and the West part. And John and I usually talk about the World Economic Forum and all of their tentacles. And I know you and I have talked a lot about how extensive their connection is with all of this school funding and indoctrination and how deep and wide it goes. And so I was hoping for the audience that you might go into that because you're so knowledgeable about that and kind of share a little bit more about that perspective as well.
Yes, I was just bringing that up, and how this has been the intention all along. But it just takes. They're very patient, aren't they? And COVID, I hate to get back to that, but that opened the door for them to initiate the thing they have been planning to do all along, and that is to indoctrinate our children.
Yeah, it's been a grand plan for a long time, and I think a lot of people don't even realize that. You know, the United Nations, along with the World Economic Forum, as if they don't have their nose in a million other things. They decide that they need to control the kids as well. So it's
well, absolutely, because my generation, which is a generation below you, my sweet friend, I'm going to say your generation is wise to the move, so to speak. You have seen what growing up and what we knew as America could be or was like. If we indoctrinate the children, of course, through fear, through wrong philosophies, through basically lies, then they will never know the difference. And I think that is why their focus is to push these ideologies through that back door of education. CASEL, SEL, CRT, and I do mean critical race theory, but because when you get pushback for something, they just change the name to it. So they change the word of the acronym. So now it is CRT, but they're calling it culturally responsive teaching, and it is promoting all those things that I think in our community in KEYK County, they would push back on if it was obvious. And they're using terms like self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, social awareness, social awareness, just another word for DEI, which now has a B behind it, you know. So it's not just diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's now diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Can you measure belonging? I mean, really? There were bunking parties that I didn't get to go to, you know, when I was growing up. But nonetheless, I'm going to move on from that. They are using these immeasurables in our school system and calling it a higher education. I mean, it is indoctrination to the nth degree, and no one is the wiser for it. So, but
and
the
they're
math
eliminating
scores,
history as well.
Oh, yes, yes, of course. You know, I was just telling John that this Glenn Beck, which I would love to see, exhibit on slavery, covers all slavery in the United States specifically, and it is not limited to the African American or Gold Coast Africa slavery. And I'll tell you kind of a little bit about me. I don't even think, Michelle, that you know this, but I have a fascination with and a high respect for the Gullah culture, which comes out of the Low Country in the United States. It's over, which would be like between North Carolina down to northern Florida. And the Gullah culture, which came out of the slave trade, was highly intelligent, absolutely capable, and given total responsibility for the farming industries, while the plantation owners during the hot months would go back inland to the mountainous areas because the coastal areas were just too hard to bear. So, I mean, they were given basically the run of the farm, so to speak. They had their own language and their own culture, and they have maintained that to this day. I actually own a Gullah New Testament in their language. It's just fascinating to me. But while, and I'm happy that they have been able to maintain their culture and their heritage. While that has been respected, so much else has not. And we have forgotten about the Irish slaves that were brought here, the Chinese who built the railroads. I mean, it seems to be a limited focus of history. And if you compare it to other cultures and other countries, there is always a turnover, always another culture who is trying to achieve. It is not a new concept by any means. Is it right? No. But do we overcome it? Yes. And who is the ultimate overcomer? It is Jesus Christ. And he says to us, he promises us that as we follow him, we will too. He will too. These things will be made right. I don't know how I got off on that, but it is a microcosm of a greater story that you can't erase. I don't care how many statues you tear down. I don't care how you rewrite history. It is what it is, and it can't be erased.
Well, you got on that subject because I mentioned that they're erasing history now in our school
yes.
system. So you didn't get too far off there.
I can chase a rabbit, that's for sure.
Well, that was all I wanted to mention. I don't want to hoard in on your interview there with John. I know that you know a lot about the UNESCO and WEF and how they have such strong connections even within our state, how they place people strategically on these education boards and, are able to implement their agendas through these people. And it's it's just like any other thing that WEF is connected to, or the United Nations. The tentacles go so far and so wide and so deep, and they're so penetrating that it almost feels like it's a losing battle. But, you know, we have to keep our focus on what's local and keep fighting for what's local in order to win. So anyway, I just wanted to say that about those two entities. So thank you for letting me.
I know that you know a lot about World Economic Forum and the nefarious intent there. But I do appreciate how you say, Michelle, and I hope this is an encouragement to all of John's listeners, that living local is really where the greatest impact is, and how you, as one of our local people on the Watchtower, are voicing that, and sometimes at great risk, really. You don't do it without criticism or prejudice. Others have been prejudiced because of your intention to call it out when you see it. And I appreciate that about you.
Thank you. Well, thank you. And I know you're in the fight as well in the education system. And Lord knows we're blessed to have you, because once you get after something, you'll dig all the way to the bottom to find out what you have to know. So it's, you know, it takes all of us to make a difference, and the local level is where it starts. It's where we affect change.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm very blessed that as I became, and I hope this is an encouragement, as I said, to John's listeners, I was very blessed to be connected to people who have been in the fight a lot longer than I was. I just kind of woke up because of COVID, and I explained that to John. And as soon as I became kind of rabid about the whole thing, people were saying, "Have you talked to so and so?" And I've done this with John as well. But have you talked to so and so, because they know so much about this? Or have you called Mr. This or that, because their topic of expertise is another? But it all ties together. And we really work together and dig and share. I mean, there is no personal ownership or limiting ego to it. We want what is great for our country, for our communities, for our children, for me, for my grandchildren, for their future that I was fortunate enough to experience 2 generations ahead of them. And it's almost unspeakable to think that they won't have the same opportunity, that someone in our education system is going to say, "Hey, you look like you should be a welder," which is fine. I mean, being a welder is a worthy and, quite frankly, lucrative profession. But it's not someone else's decision to make in our education system. Our education system is supposed to do just that, educate the student toward a common goal in the education system of reading, writing, and arithmetic, so that they have the capacity to study and explore and decide for themselves what they want to be in their future. This is not China. We don't decide. We allow them to, and I'm going to use the phrase, critically think about all of their options. And that is a good thing. But as usual, the left has captured that term and turned it into something that, in my book, is almost, cuss worthy. So that's my
the whole thing is cuss worthy.
Yeah. Which I'm trying not to do. Yeah, I think John took a break.
I'm just listening, gals. That's all I'm doing. I'm just that's what I do. If I get two people on talking, I just let you go. I'm not gonna. I don't butt in. I'm not gonna butt in, and I do say that I'm gonna have to end the show pretty shortly. And let me put this to both of you because I think it would be great if I had you both on again a little bit down the road, and we could, because I've been in contact with Gail, and she's going to look at her schedule next week. Maybe I'll get her on next Friday. That's what I'm hoping for. But I would really like to have you. I would like to have you both on at one time because you guys kind of feed off each other, and you've got a lot of good information to share. And I'd love to, if we could schedule you both on a Friday night at the same time. I would really, really like to have you both on at the same time, and we can just keep digging. I don't mind covering this education topic over and over again because I know every time that we talk, we're going to talk about something new. So if you guys would be interested in doing that, I'd love to do it.
Well, I'm always going to be in Michelle's company.
And I feel the same about Kim. Now, I'm not as knowledgeable about the education part of it as she is. I kind of got my hands in other things, but, I'm certainly happy to join. You should see us when we go to lunch. It usually ends up about 3 hours, John. There's never a quick lunch for us, so.
Hey, I know that feeling because with Sam and Trish, if we have a phone call or if I go over to their house, it's not 15 minutes. It's an hour and a half, 2 hours. I mean, our phone calls easily last an hour, sometimes 2 hours. We just get to talking about anything and everything, local, state, federal. We go off on all kinds of tangents, and we have a great conversation. So I understand completely. Well, if it's all right with you, I'm going to go ahead and end the show now, and then I will get back into contact with both of you very soon and try to get you both on at the same time because I would, with Michelle's knowledge on the WEF and some of the stuff the UN's doing, and Kim, what you've been delving into, I know they tie into each other, so it'd be great to have both of you kind of giving input at the same, well, not at the same time. I know you guys don't want to talk over each other, but have you on at the same time so maybe we can get a really good understanding of how these two things tie together. And everybody else can learn a lot at the same time as I do because I'm not real knowledgeable on this. So it helps me out a great deal, and it would help out my listeners as well. So if you'd like, we'll try to get that on the schedule here in the next, month or two, if that's feasible for both of you, and get that penciled in and just have a good old time.
Well, sounds good, John.
I'd love it.
Well,
thank you so much, John. It was great to be on your show. I appreciate the invitation myself, and I know Michelle is used to you. I was a bit nervous. You made me feel quite comfortable, and I hope it was a benefit to your listeners. And I would ask that God would bless you all, and that He would work all things together for good in the lives of your listeners.
Well,
I know He will.
I greatly appreciate you taking time out for me, Kim, and Michelle. Thank you for calling in because, I've had Michelle on twice. Kim, this is your first time with me, of course, and again, that's why I told you I do. That's why my concept with this show is the way it is. I want people to come on here. I don't want to stick to just certain things. I like it to free flow, and I kind of took that from Sam and the way he does his show. It's a free flowing thing. It makes me comfortable. It makes my guests comfortable, and my audience likes it because it's just like a no holds barred. Let's just talk about things. Let's air our grievances with government or whoever, and I guess it's kind of therapeutic maybe because both of us are all of us are just kind of letting it rip and getting it off our chests, and I think it's quite therapeutic. But the audience and myself, we all learn a little bit from the guests. So I will be in contact with you guys very shortly. And again, thank you so much for coming on with me tonight, and hope to talk to you guys again real soon.
Thanks, John. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Be blessed. Bye-bye.
Have a great
Bye,
weekend.
Kim.
All right, folks. Well, that was Kim. Swartz at the beginning, and Michelle Latham checked in, and that was really cool. I've never had anybody do that before, and it was really great that Michelle chimed in as well, because, I mean, that, again, we've had Michelle on a couple times, and she does a great job. She knows her stuff, and apparently Kim really knows her stuff. And then if we can get Gail on, which Gail, Jacob Turner told me about her, Kim told me about her. So if we can get Gail on to discuss what she's learned, folks, we're going to tear into this education thing if it's the last thing I do, I guess. I've been kind of tossing out things, but they have much more, a much wider breadth of knowledge than I do. All right, folks, with that being said, again, don't forget to check out MOLibertyRadio.us, especially on Sunday nights from 6 to 9 p.m. Central Time. Sam and Trish Britton, Off the Cuff Radio. Also, don't forget to go to mofree.org. Get on the email list. Patrick says he's going to do a show tomorrow night. It'll start at 7:30. Look for that on Odyssey. And join in on that live stream and get educated. And also, I want to promote the heck out of Catherine Dreher and Kirby Lane's podcast, Rogue Politics, because they have been doing some great episodes lately, and I get a kick out of listening to them because they have it's great when you have two people that are on all the time. Catherine and Kirby, of course, know each other well. And, they get into topics, but they inject a little humor, and they're kind of laughing. They're having a good time. And it makes it an enjoyable, educational podcast. And I just love to listen to them. So you can find them on YouTube, and you can find them on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple, Spreaker, a lot of different avenues. Please, please, please download some of those episodes or watch them on YouTube. Check them out. You won't be disappointed. But again, check out all. Oh, and don't forget about KEYK too. I forgot to throw them in there. That's awful of me. I'm a terrible podcast host. But they've been good, and they are looking at picking up Catherine's show as well. So Catherine's going to have another avenue. Now, she is also on MOLibertyRadio.us as well. So you can hear her there. You can hear her on YouTube. You can hear her on podcast apps. And now it sounds like she's been invited to join in on KEYK. If she gets that, then we got two different podcasts here in Missouri that are reaching multiple avenues and spreading the good word of liberty on my side. And then Catherine and Kirby do the same thing, but they follow the money. And that's highly important, and that is not your usual podcast. So good stuff all the way around, and it's nice to see other podcasters succeed and reach a greater audience. And I have a great appreciation for Sam and Trish, Patrick, Catherine and Kirby, and so many others in Missouri, in the Missouri Freedom Initiative grassroots movement. A great appreciation for all the hard work that they put in. All right, folks, with that being said, let's call it a night. Have a great week, everybody. Next week, I hope to have Gail on. If not, it might just be me unless I come up with another guest. And but anyway, we'll have lots of good information, lots of good freedom talk. Have a great weekend. Be safe. Be free. Take care.
Okay, yes.
Why do I keep hitting the wrong button?
Want more freedom? It starts with you. Join us next week on the Missouri Liberty Report and find out how you can get involved to take back your state.
All right, folks. Thanks so much for, again, joining in with me and joining along tonight. And that was a really good conversation. Kim was like, I told her if she could do an hour with me, that was great. But I was like, we'll just do whatever you're comfortable with. We got hour and about an hour and a half or a little over. So that was good stuff. I was just I was starting to wear out, and I'm like, I'm not going to soak up any more information while they're talking. So I wanted to save some for later so I could also learn. It's great for you guys to learn, but I got to learn too. An old man brain kicked in on me. But anyway, thanks again, guys. Gary, it's good to see you. Voodoo Queen, thanks. John Doe, Patrick Holland, Catherine Dreyer. Good to see you all in here tonight. Greatly appreciate all of you. And again, we'll be back next week for another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. So with that, I bid you farewell. Take care, everybody. And again, have a great weekend.